Welcome back to the Grow and Preserve Kitchen. This is going to be a fun day, I hope everything works out just fine. Here's my disclaimer, I am winging it today. I have no recipe. I have in my head what I want to do. We'll just see if it works out the way I want it to. I love tomato soup. I don't often can tomato soup. I've done a couple over the years. One I did was a oven roasted tomato soup that was very, I don't know, kind of winter cozy. And then a couple of years ago, I did one that I called a cheater tomato soup that was very much like, Campbell's soup. You would find, any kind of condensed soup or whatever that you would find at the grocery store, which has its place. But again, that's not really what I want either. What I want in this jar of tomato soup is summer fresh. So that's what I'm going for today. We'll see if I can manage to do that. Now, normally when I'm going to do tomato soup for dinner, say we're going to have tomato soup and a grilled cheese sandwich, which is one of my favorite things to have, that kind of childhood reminder thing. So when we do that, I pull out a couple of jars of crushed tomatoes. I put them in the blender. I season them up the way I want, lemon juice, basil, a little bit of salt. And then when I get it to the consistency and the taste that I want, I add some cream of some sort. Now, sometimes it's full fat coconut milk, sometimes it's half and half. You could use heavy whipping cream, whatever it is that you would use in that circumstance. And then I heat it up and serve it for dinner. And that is a soup, and it's very fresh tasting. It's very lemony, very basil-y. The tomatoes aren't really overcooked. It's just, it's just delicious. And it's different than the previous couple of tomato soups that I've done. So that is what I'm going for today. I cannot find a recipe that really gets me to where I want to be. I have a couple that kind of bring it close. So if you are very comfortable with canning and measuring your pH, and all the rules of water bath canning, I'll show you the process I go through to kind of decide where I am in that process and what is going to make a viable recipe safe for water bath canning. If you are not yet comfortable with canning, I'll point you to a couple of books if I can find any recipes online that look really good. I'll put some of those down below as well. But I would suggest you just follow some recipes for a while until you know exactly what it is you're doing and how things work out when they go from the pot to the canner and then to the bowl. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do, I have 10 pounds of tomatoes. Now, normally I would use plum tomatoes for this. I don't have 10 pounds of plum tomatoes left, so I have all different kinds of tomatoes. I have one tray under the broiler now. All I'm going to do is get those skins off, get a little bit of the liquid out. I'm going to mash those up a little bit, get some more liquid out, and then I'm going to put this tray in, and I have another half a tray or so of tomatoes. So I'm going to go ahead and cycle through those, and then we'll talk about what the next steps are. So I do have two recipes that I am using for some guidance. The first is out of the Better Homes and Garden Complete Canning Guide, page 456. It is called Lemony Tomato Basil Soup. Sounded like exactly what I wanted, but it's not. It's actually lemony, tomato, basil, heavy on the onion, carrot, celery. I don't know. I didn't really want the carrots and the celery in my tomato soup. So I'm not going to use exactly that recipe. They also use a ton of onions, 4 cups of onions. I thought that was kind of crazy, 4 cups of onions to 10 pounds of tomatoes. So that was not exactly what I wanted, but I do have guidance in here for how many jars this is going to make, how long I need to process, that kind of stuff. Tomato soup, which is a recipe on page 82 of Not Your Mama's Canning book, is pretty similar to this one without really the extra lemon and the basil. It also uses 10 pounds of tomatoes, uses 1.5 cups of chopped onions, which is what I used in mine. And it also uses carrots and celery, which I'm not using. It adds garlic, which I will use. And then it has oregano and bay leaves and crushed red pepper flakes. Sounds lovely, but not what I'm going for in this particular batch. So I'm going to use basil instead. So back to this one. This one uses 1 cup of lightly packed fresh basil. So that's kind of the guidance I'll be using there. I will be testing the pH of this as we go along. I'm not adding nearly as many low acid ingredients as either of these two recipes, so I'm sure my pH will be fine, but I will check it every step of the way. As I said, I want this to be a lemon basil tomato soup, so I have no problem adding lemon juice to this. I want a good lemon taste, kind of in the background, but I want to know that there's lemon in there. I also want to know that there's basil in there. So I think it's going to turn out great, but you know, we'll see. Okay, so what I have done, I am taking the skins off. All of the tomatoes are out of the oven now. I just had them in there long enough on broil to loosen up the skins. As always, I am saving the skins and I will freeze dry those. That's one thing I just love having on the shelf, is the freeze dried tomato powder. So I'm going to finish getting these off, and then I am, in kind of a very messy way, squishing these tomatoes into a strainer to drain off a bunch of that liquid, because I'm not using all plum tomatoes. In fact, I'm not using mostly plum tomatoes even. So I want to get some of that off. And then I'm going to do a light round in the blender just to break it up a little bit, and then I'm going to run it through the strainer to get out the seeds. Sounds like a lot of steps, but they are easy steps. So that is how I'm doing that today. I have already kind of taken the raw edge off some onions. As I said, I did 1.5 cups of diced onions. So I've kind of sweated those out. I didn't want to caramelize them because, again, I don't want that kind of cozy winter. I want summer, bright and fresh. So I did not caramelize them, but I certainly don't want them to resemble raw onions in my tomato soup. Oops. I'm not doing this the right way. Hang on. The tomatoes go in here, not the skins. All right, I think I did that. And then I'll put everything on the stove, and we will heat it up and cook it down only as long as I need to get to the consistency that I want. And I'll be adding some garlic, probably in the form of powder. And I'll be adding salt, of course. And then, as I mentioned, at least 1 cup of fresh chopped basil. And we'll see if I think it needs anything else along the way. Lemon juice, of course. So you can tell in these two recipes, the one that has the most low acid ingredients uses 3/4 cup of lemon juice. And the other one uses 1/4 cup of lemon juice. So at least they recognize that they had a pH issue there. So that is the kind of attention I will pay to this one as I get ready to can it. I've done so many trays of tomato skins so far this year. I'm really excited about that. Particularly these with a little bit of char on them. I like having that in the mix. Okay, these are good. Now, here's where I get a little messy. I just want to squeeze, make sure I get some seeds out before I stick it in the blender, and some liquid out. Ugh, what a mess. These are still a little hot. That's okay. All right, one last small tray of tomatoes to peel and squish in here, and then we'll get them going in the blender. I am a total mess. Oh, ow, 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 ow. Okay. I'm going to clean up, and then we'll make another mess. I have poured off about 4 cups of tomato liquid so far. So I'm just going to set that to the side. If I need it to loosen up my soup, I can certainly add it back. Otherwise, as I've been doing all summer, I will put it in a baggie, lay it flat in the freezer, and freeze it. until I have another use coming up for it. So we'll continue to have a little more liquid down here in the bottom of this, but I'm going to go ahead and start loading the blender. Now this blender is capable of just demolishing most of those seeds, and I don't necessarily want my seeds demolished in there yet. What I want to do is get it to a consistency that I can put it through the food mill. And that's really all I want to do. So I'm going to do a small batch and we're going to see how it goes. See. Perfect. I can still see whole seeds, but it is tomato passata. I think it's passata, tomato passata. It's basically super crushed tomatoes. Almost tomato sauce, but really more like super crushed tomatoes. So that's pretty much what I have here. I have some full seeds in there. Gotta make some room. There is not nearly enough room here. So what I'm going to do for this is the pot I used to sweat down those onions, and it's the pot I'm going to use to cook the soup down. So I'm just going to pour this straight into my strainer. I have it on the medium grind on the strainer, medium holes. Tastes delicious, tastes just like fresh tomatoes. And I'm going to set this aside for a minute while we do another round. A lot of stuff in the way. So if you're not a big fan of lemon with your tomatoes, you can also do pressure canning recipes for tomato soup. I think that the roasted tomato soup I did several years ago was actually a pressure canning recipe. If I can find that one, I'll link it below. I'm not sure where I got it from though. Okay. See if you can see the consistency in that. I have to run it through a little bit. Squeaky today. All right, let's get this last batch of remaining tomatoes in here. I have more liquid in the bottom here, which I will transfer over. All right, let's get this run through the strainer here. It's looking good down there. So technically I didn't need to remove the tomato skins before doing this, although it does keep this from getting so clogged up, and it gives me tomato skins that I can actually use. I always hate to let those go. All right. I think there's some more pulp I can get out of this. So, but it's not going to go anywhere there. There are too many seeds. So let me see. The big food mills, you know, you can just run this back through the pulp and seeds and skin and whatever is there. You usually get a good bit more pulp because I do not want to bring out my food mill, my big one. This is such a small batch. I'm just going to do it this way. This is working fine. There will be some I miss for sure. Okay. All right, it's already looking like a great consistency for kind of a fresh tomato soup. So I won't be cooking it down too long. All right, let's get this on the stove and we'll get the onions in and we'll get cleaned up. I'll bring you over here. Let me show you this consistency. There are some seeds in here. I wish there were not, but there are. I do like that I'm making a mess. I do like that it still looks like tomatoes though. So I'm okay with that. I think I'm going to end up, I don't know whether I'm going to end up putting it back in the blender. Depends how much these seeds bother me as we go along. I might put it back in the blender and completely blend it to smithereens after it's cooked down a little bit with the onions. But we will play that one by ear. I thought maybe I would just use the immersion blender, but I don't know. I don't like seeing the seeds in my tomato soup. But I do like seeing the pulp, and that's just a delicate balance to walk there. Okay, so the onions that I had sweated down earlier. I'll let that come up to temperature so I can taste it, heat it through, and then we'll decide how much salt, how much garlic, if I need any allulose, or you could use sugar. And then we'll get, actually maybe I'll do a pH test before I put the lemon juice in, and then we'll do another one afterward. I think that's probably a good idea. So some recipes want you to cook down your tomato soup for like 4 hours. That doesn't just scream summer fresh tomato basil soup to me. So I am not going to do that. I'm going to cook it, I was going to say till it gets to the right consistency, but honestly I think this is. I think I'm going to end up with maybe 4 pints. One of the recipes I'm kind of loosely basing this on ends up with 6 pints, one ends up with 5 pints, but I have several cups fewer vegetables, you know, because I'm not using the carrots, I'm not using nearly as many onions as I used in one, and I'm not using the celery. So I expect 4 is going to be where I end up, which is just fine. That's enough to keep my husband happy for lunch throughout the winter. Okay, we'll let that come up to temperature. Definitely going to run this back through the big blender because the seeds are just driving me a little batty, even as I stand here. I love the pulp, but I just don't want to see the seeds in my soup. Before I pop it back in there, let's go ahead and take a pH test. We'll do another one once it's blended because then all of the onions are blended into it. So, here we go. Try to do this where you can see it. Okay, I'm just going to rub that on a paper towel to get the tomato off. And let's see. I think we're between 3.5 and 4. I could be convinced it's 3.5. Yeah, I couldn't be convinced it's 4. Somewhere in there is where I think we are. So technically we're good for water bath canning without the lemon juice, but as I said, I am going for a lemon basil tomato soup. I have my canner heating up my jars here. I'm going to turn that down just a little bit. Get this blended one more time so it is smooth as can be. We'll test the pH again when the onions blended in. Then I'll add the lemon juice and the basil. I may add the basil while it's kind of on its last run in the blender, actually. Okay, I'm going to turn that off. See, this is what happens when you wing it. It's a lot more fun to cook this way, I think. But it is kind of one of these stop and go kind of things here. And that's okay. To me, this is fun. This is how I cook. Let's I don't know if I can get all of this in here. Probably not. Which means I'm going to have to get yet another bowl dirty. My kitchen. You'll have to see my kitchen. I'll turn you around in a second. I don't often show you what my kitchen looks like on the other side because it is a disaster, but today is particularly bad. I could fit all of it in there, but I don't think I'm going to. All right, I'm going to get this really blended up, find something to put it in, and then we'll get the final batch done. Okay, no seeds in there. And you can still tell that it was made with fresh tomatoes. So I'm pretty happy with that. Let me get the last batch done. All right, it's going to go right back in this pot once I get it blended up. Now, before I do the final spin on this in the blender, I'm going to add the basil. Now, let's add a little basil. Following the one recipe I told you about, I'm adding a cup of loosely packed basil. And I just want to make this a little bit smaller, but not so small that I can't tell that there's basil in my soup. All right, I think that might be enough. Yes, I think that is great. Hot as can be. I have made such a mess. Oh, let me show you the kitchen. Hang on. Okay, so here we are back here with all this mess going on. The blender, the rest of the island, all the bowls that I've used, haven't done anything with. You could see way far over there on the table. That's all I have left for tomatoes. Then here we go, spin around. You can see the mess over here. All the trays I have yet to clean up. All the extra basil I harvested today. I don't have a freeze dryer tray handy, so I think I'll give that to my neighbor. Okay, now you've seen the mess. Let's go back and try to turn this into soup. Okay, there's this one. Man, my canner over here is going crazy. I have 5 pints in there. I don't think I'm going to need all of them, but we'll see. Yes, we'll get yet another dirty bowl out of the way. Okay. So there is all of that basil coming in. And what want salt, a little bit of garlic. I'm probably going to want a little bit of allulose, but now that the onions are blended into it, you know, they're sweet, so I will taste it, see if I want any allulose. Or not, and then we'll get our lemon juice in. Okay. Here's that basil. Okay, my heat's not on at the moment. I'm going to have to heat it up again because my jars are screaming hot in there. Oh, it's fantastic. Really, really, really good. Definitely need some salt. Pardon me while I reach over you. Let's see if either of these recipes call for salt. One calls for 4 teaspoons of salt and a 1/4 cup of sugar. The other has no salt. Wow, no salt at all in the Not Your Mama's canning book. So I think I'm going to do half a tablespoon. We'll start with that, half a tablespoon. Try to keep that reasonably clean in case I need it for garlic. I'm not sure I'm going to put garlic in here. Oh my gosh. Oh, that is so good. All right, let's do another pH test and then we'll get some lemon in. Okay, let's take a little bit of this. It's important to test it once the onion is blended in because, you know, that's the low acid part. Okay, so that's what I'm going to test. Let me get a strip. Now, let's see, can you see that? We're still between 3.5 and 4. We may be leaning more toward 4 now that I've blended the onions in. Either way, it does meet the criteria of being safe to water bath can. However, I do want lemon in my lemony basil tomato soup. So there is one recipe that calls for a 1/4 cup, one that calls for 3/4 cup. I don't even have as many low acid vegetables in mine as the one that says a 1/4 cup. So I'm going to start with 1/8 cup. Know that the pH is fine, but we'll see if I get the lemony flavor I'm looking for out of that. Oh, I should turn the heat back on. I may add a touch more salt as well. This is really good. I think I'm going to be so happy with this one. Oh, that's so good. I'm going to add just a little more lemon juice and a little more salt. Another tablespoon of lemon juice. Got another half teaspoon maybe of salt. Be thrilled to get 5 pints out of this, but I don't think there's any way. I think that this pot is 5 quarts. Looks like I have about 2 quarts. I'm not quite to halfway. Yeah. Oh, that is really good. I think I want more lemon juice. My goodness. So all told, I'm going to end up with about a 1/4 cup of lemon juice in here. Okay, that's it. I'm not going to touch it anymore. I'm going to clean up my dish. We'll do one last pH test. All right, since I've been adding things with reckless abandon, let's do one last pH test before we get this in some jars. I do need to crank the heat. It's not hot enough to go in super hot jars yet. All right. Okay, let's get this. Oh, yeah, clearly now I think that we are, can you see that? I think we're between 3 and 3.5. I may even call that 3. That's because I like the lemon flavor. Okay, so this is good to can. I'm gonna clear all this out, get my jars out of there, and bring this up to temp, and then we'll get it loaded up. Okay, my soup has come back up to a boil. I had to actually add some more water to my canner over here, so that's going to take a second to get back up to speed, which is fine. Happy with the taste. I'm happy with the pH. I'm happy with the consistency. So let's get this jarred up. I optimistically put 5 jars in the canner. I left the lids on the other side of the room. Well, I'll have to go get those. Half-inch headspace. It's kind of a generous half-inch. This is one of those clear jars without the big logo and all the markings on the side. I love those. I wish I had more of those. I have a little snack for lunch left, and that's about it. Okay, so let's check my headspace on all these. All right, I think that's good. Not too much left. Oops, I don't even know if you can see it. There's really not much left at all. So let me get these rims wiped up and get the lids and rings on. All right. Seems like a whole lot of work for 4 jars, doesn't it? I think that if this processes well and holds well, like I think it will, and if David likes it as much as I do, next time I do this, I will do at least a double batch. So as I said, this is not a particular recipe that I've ever canned before, although it does follow all of the guidelines. But you have to be able to check that pH, and you have to feel good about lemon juice. Or you could add vinegar, you could add citric acid, but basically you need to be willing to add the amount of acid it takes if for some reason yours is not registering as it needs to for water bath canning. These are going to process for 35 minutes. I'm using the steam canner. That's a water bath time, so 35 minutes. Then in a traditional water bath, you would turn it off, remove the lid, let them sit for 5 minutes. In the steam canner, I'm going to turn off the flame, leave the lid on, let it sit for 5 minutes, and then I'll get them out. And I'm going to move these into the canner. We're coming back up here. It was going so well before it burned off a lot of my, or I guess evaporated a lot of my water in the bottom. So this needs to come back up. Did you see it? Did I show it to you? It really is beautiful. I love the little bits of basil in it. And I do love that I don't see any seeds on the side of the jar. Okay, so it's got a ways to go to come back up. Let me bring you up here. Ah, you're way tall now. I'm gonna give that a few minutes to come back up to where it needs to be for my elevation, which is the dark green. And then I'll set the timer for 35 minutes. Meanwhile, I'm gonna clean up a little bit, or clean up a lot. One other thing I wanted to show you is that I ended up with 5 cups. I don't know that I could hold that straight, but that's 5 cups of tomato liquid. Okay, that was my timer, so let's get this lid off and hope that that went well. It did, yay. I should give you an update on the soup as well. It was a good wife, and I gave David my little snack of tomato soup. He loved it. So if I get another 10 pounds of tomatoes coming in, which I hope I will in a few weeks, you know, I don't know, we'll see, I may not. But if I do, I'll make another batch because he really enjoyed that. Here's the jar that's siphoned a little bit. You can see it down there. That's okay. Looks like that one may have just a bit too. All right, 4 jars. Wish I had at least 8, but I don't. All right, so that's gonna wrap me up for today. Thank you so much for spending the day with me. I know it was a little different, but you know, stuff has to get done, right? So thank you for being here. If you had fun with this video, I hope you'll give it a thumbs up. Hope to see you next week. Thanks so much. Bye-bye. My shirt been hanging down like that the whole time.